Every 90 seconds, someone is reported missing. Many return to their families. For others, something has gone seriously wrong. A young boy has vanished from outside his home.
And Mark wasn't there, and the cameras couldn't see him anywhere.
Triggering a frantic police search.
The helicopter was flying fairly low to use their thermal imaging camera.
And there was no sightings. And that's the issue. Where is he?
What happens in the police investigation that follows?
And as I pulled out the bin kind of swiveled round, and Alan said, "Oh my God, what is that?"
What happens to the family at its heart?
And that was hard to understand why somebody would want to do that.
When missing turns to murder. Margaret gives birth to her third son, Mark, on the 2nd of January 1996. They and their extended family all live and grow up together in a tower block on the Royston Hill estate in Glasgow.
Being Mark's mum was amazing. It was just a blessing that I could see my mum bonding more with all the kids, and then Mark bonded really well with my mum. The 3 boys all living in the one house and being overcrowded. Mark had that brightness about him, even though we were overcrowded. It was brilliant, but I was trying to find my own place. I'd been at my mum's for close to a year when I got the house up the stair, and then we went on to a new adventure with Mark.
Very boisterous, you know, the youngest of 3 boys. Character, definitely a character. We were very close. Kids were in and out each other's houses.
It's always a smile on his face, always up for doing everything and anything and playing with his brothers.
Mark liked to be adventurous, so he would always find new things to do. They used to call us the 3 Musketeers because we were always up to something. We always wanted to help the neighbours. We would go to shops for them. We used to hide under boxes and hide and chase people and creep up on them and use our environment. We stayed in a high flat. We were 17 up, which was great. We loved the view. My mum and my gran used to point out the window and tell us what this is and where that is, and like just knowing your area and stuff like that.
He wanted to be either a fireman or a policeman or an ambulance.
He always wanted to just help people.
The whole area has benefited from regeneration in the 1990s.
You did feel safe and everything like that there, obviously, knowing that everybody was watching your kids, and the concierge were there with the cameras round about and things like that. It was like different cultures up in Royston. It was the refugees had moved over. It was brilliant. It was more fun because then you know that growing up your kids would be learning about different religions, different cultures.
As we got older and we started to get to know more people, that got easier for my mum to let us out and venture out. A neighbour moved in and Mark got friendly with them.
The family has a young son, Alex. He's around Mark's age, and they become friends.
They would go, they were thick as thieves, you could say. They're always in each other's houses. Anytime there's Mark, oh, he's in Alex, he's playing a computer. Or he's with Alex, they're in the landing, they're playing football in the landing. You obviously can't keep us cooked up forever. We need to go out and venture out and learn about life.
One condition of this freedom is the three brothers must always return home for their meals at a set time.
I allowed them to go out for a wee bit and the three of them went out to play. I called David up just so I could make them sandwiches because I was going to let them take them outside to eat. David came up to help me. When he came up, I hadn't into the kitchen because I had the washing on. So I went back out to the veranda to look down and I couldn't see Mark out the front bit. So I had asked David to run down to Alex's house to see if he was there. He wasn't there. I asked him to go down just in case he went over my sister's.
I remember David coming to my door. He'd been kind of out looking for him. At the time, you just think, kids, you know what he's like. I remember saying this to Margaret Ann, he'll have went with his friend. With Mark having that kind of wee, mischievous nature, he's probably went down to the shops or, knowing Mark, somebody's probably said, oh, there's a disco on. And he'd probably have been like, oh, aye, let's go.
I was hunting for him. I went down to the concierge and the concierge were looking through the cameras and they were phoning up other people that Mark might have went to in the other flats to see if he'd been there. The more that they were doing the phone calls and checking and Mark wasn't there and the cameras couldn't see him anywhere.
She was very upset, just really dead worried. Right away, time's passing. Although be a very short time, I think for any one of us, it felt like a long time that he'd been missing, but, you're talking most probably 45 minutes to an hour from Mark went missing. She was going over everything in her head, like, where can he be? I've contacted the police, and just very anxious, very, very anxious, as a mother would be.
The nearest police unit to Charles Street is dispatched. On duty that evening, Sergeant Gary Scott.
I received a call from my control room to the effect that there was a missing person. You're really hoping that whoever's missing returns home by the time you actually get to the location, and you hope all is well and normal service could be resumed. That's what you were hoping for.
While family and friends are searching the block and surrounding area, Mum Margaret waits for the police to arrive.
I got the impression right away from Margaret that this was totally out of character for young Mark. When Margaret shouted on Mark to come in, she didn't have to shout twice. Mark would have been up these stairs. That's she kind of ruled the roost like that. So this was very much out of character for young Mark to be missing. And that was probably the first point where I thought, this is strange.
More officers are drafted in to help find Mark.
Gary realised something was amiss. He contacted me and asked me to attend. We started making inquiries, looked at CCTV in the concierge's office. They'd covered all the flats and there was cameras outside every flat. I said, we need to look at all the cameras, just make sure where this wee fella's gone. Asked for another car to join us.
I remember getting told to come home and ushered home. Then police coming in and out. And then asked questions like, do you know any friends' houses it could be? Or who he was talking to today? Or do you know anybody that would would hurt him. And being younger, you're obviously like, no, why would anybody do that?
Eight-year-old Mark Cummings has vanished without a trace.
As soon as there's a report of a missing child, that is a high risk. And because there's all sorts of concerns, a child is an innocent person, a person that's vulnerable, and that is treated, you know, very quickly as a high-risk missing person.
The helicopter was flying fairly low to use their thermal imaging camera. I'd requested a dog, and there was a dog unit on the way.
It needed all the resources that were there, and they were making inquiries, local inquiries, and then expanding out. And there was no sightings. Where is he?
I was only 11. We were still thinking it's just a game, and we're still being our usual chirpy selves at the time. And your friends are there, and you're just looking for him.
The father of the three boys, who live separately, heads straight over in his car to help in the search for his son.
We drove about in the car because my dad didn't come from there, so he didn't know where he was going, and we knew the geography of the area. We knew where we were going, what we were doing, so took him out. Seeing police everywhere and looking up, and there's helicopters. You just can't accept that you're involved in this.
I had a full description of Mark. We actually had a photograph of Mark. We had officers, both foot and mobile patrol duties, and they were checking areas surrounding Charles Street. But they were also checking local haunts where the youngsters would be and hang out in case young Mark had made his way there. We were very much under the auspice that Mark had gone missing from the area from where he was playing football. So it would be small stages of checking the grassland area next to where he'd been missing, various paths, roadways, streets, etc. And that would, over a period of time, scale out and scale out. But the helicopter was the main one. We'd be able to cover large areas of the vicinity.
As the night went on, more family joined. My best friend, who worked in a local bar, she left work and came to be with us. Like my older brother came.
Something inside me was like feeling uneasy. I felt as if like I was a suspect. They wanted to check the house, but knowing that Mark wasn't in the house was hard to put in my head. Why are you searching here? I've already told you my boy's outside.
So you look closely at the individual because it's a victim. You look at people round about that individual to assess if there's risk there, to assess if there is a genuine missing person report or if there's criminality by the family. And that does happen quite a lot. It is standard practice to make sure that you take a full statement from the family or the person that's reporting that person missing.
Every minute was like an hour and time was just not moving. I wanted to go back out and search for Mark, but I was sort of felt as if like I was a prisoner in my own house, not being able to go out and look for my boy.
But Margaret's other son, David, is out and desperately looking for his brother, and he's got a lead from Mark's young friend, Alex.
I remember running down to the bus stop and asking if Mark was there. And I remember Alex saying that he's with a friend, he's going to go and get some games for the computer. He was saying 6'5" or 5'4" or it was telling me the house number, then like it didn't click on at the time.
Under pressure to find Mark, police ask his mother if she'll consider going public.
The police were just asking if, like, I was capable of speaking out and doing an appeal in the hope that somebody would see Mark or know where Mark is. They would say to you, like, try not to break down or anything like that, because you don't want whoever has Mark to see your emotions and sort of see you breaking down, because it kind of gives them a bit more strength and power.
While an anxious Margaret considers going in front of the TV news cameras, Sergeant Craig Warden and another sergeant, John Ramsey, investigate all clues.
I just started to view the footage, and I always remember, I'll never forget it, on the bottom right-hand side of the monitor, there was a television picture covering the emergency oblique fire escape. It was in the ground floor. It was showing a stairway leading from the ground floor to the first floor. And all of a sudden, into the picture came young Mark, and an adult who, at that time, I had no idea who he was.
You're thinking, what is this guy doing? Who is he? What is he doing? Why is he using the fire exit? Because that fire exit, nobody goes in from the outside, if you know what. It's a fire exit, it's to get out of the building quickly. So it was locked. There was cameras on the outside and a little bit of the internal walkway inside the fire exit. We need to find out his identity and where he is as a matter of urgency, an extreme matter of urgency. Because if we find him, we'll find Mark.
But there are 20 floors of apartments above them.
There's lots of flats in our, high flats in our area, and we covered a lot of flats. There's a very, very high density population. 120 flats. Every flat has at least one person in it, sometimes a whole family. The concierge was brilliant. He had a great memory on him. He knew just about everybody. And he started for the first floor, naming the people that lived in the first floor, the 6 flats, second floor, third, fourth, and he got to the 5th floor. And he said, I don't know the person that's number 5. I can't even remember the number of the flat. Right, who's there? He said, I don't know. Who's registered? He said, it's a homeless house for asylum seekers, I think. So we went up, myself and my colleague, chapped the door, and right away we realised this isn't the fellow. It was an Indonesian family who were in there. And they invited us into the house. We had a quick look around, I searched the house, and there's no way the fellow that we saw on the video was in this house. We went back down again, spoke to the concierge, and said, look, it's not on the 5th floor. What about the 6th floor? And he went through them all. He says, I don't know the people in 6-1. I got the name. He said, it's just a man in his own. So we went upstairs, and we trapped the door, and this man answered it. An older man, certainly not the fellow that was on the video. He invited us in. We explained that we're looking for a missing child. We don't know where he is, but we think he's in the flats. And we asked him if we could search the house. And we searched the house very, very quickly. This man's bedroom, and in the other bedroom there was cuddly toys, like teddy bears and things like that. And John asked him, he said, what is the cuddly toys for? And he said, oh, it's my son's when he stays here. But there was no sign of a child there. And I thought, well, we'll keep on looking, because it was imperative we had to find a child.
In the concierge's office, the sergeant discovers more footage of the suspect, seen working on his vehicle.
This fella carries a trolley jack to his car, and he works in his car outside. His car's a It was a purple car. I think it was a Vauxhall Cavalier. And right away I said to John, I searched that other room, and in that room there was a trolley jack under the bed. And the two of us just looked at each other, but flying back up the stairs. The same man answered the door, and he kind of just... We asked him, who else is in this house? Who has access to the house? He's mentioned your son. Who's your son? What's his name? And to this day, never forget, he just said, I didn't want to tell you, but I'm telling you now. My son's a registered sex offender. Between the two of us, you kind of knocked us down with a feather. We were absolutely gobsmacked, because now not only have we got a missing child, we've now got a potential abduction by a paedophile.
Police now have a suspect, 28-year-old Stuart Leggett.
Stuart Leggett's dad told the police that his son was dangerous. But when it happened, he couldn't cope with that, and he will feel some sort of guilt himself.
Now with a name, police call in CID officers, who immediately try to trace both Leggett and his vehicle. On the vast housing estate, the search for Mark continues.
I remember Craig saying to me, he says, Gary, we need to check the bin area. And the bin area was situated next to the concierge office. Craig managed to get the concierge staff to open the bin area.
It was the most terrifying night in my life, to be standing at the veranda and looking down and seeing them opening the bin shed.
As he pulled out the bin kind of swivelled round, and Alan said, "Oh my God, what is that?" And I could see a child's foot with striped blue socks on. The concierge was there, Alan was there. I said, "Right, everybody out." This boy could have still been alive as far as I was concerned. I looked in the bin. I'm tall enough to look in the bin. So I started clearing rubbish back, and there was just Mark's face. His eyes closed, and he wasn't breathing. I kind of had my head right down inches from his face, kind of talking to him. I said, "Come on, son, please, just give me a flicker. Just please do something, you know." And there was nothing. I felt for a pulse. There was nothing. No, he's obviously been dead for a while. And
I was looking down, and my first thing was, they found him.
Your head just goes to a blur. You just blank everything. Nothing is reality at that moment in time. Nothing you see is real. It's like a nightmare. Just all those people there, all the questions getting asked, all the radios going off, and everybody angry and hurt.
That night, just my whole entire world collapsed. It was the end of an inspiring, beautiful life. Gone for what? For what reason?
My mum being protective. I don't remember her telling me exactly what happened. think everybody just wanted to protect us because we were so young. They didn't want to tell us the extent of what happened and how it happened and who and where and when.
I remember kind of looking down and I was like to my older brother, there's police tape around the flat. I knew something terrible had happened. And then we heard quite a lot of kind of commotion.
A major crime scene is declared.
I was feeling in shock. I was feeling sick. Only minutes ago, I had been interviewing Mark's mother, Margaret, and established what a lovely character Mark was, a lovely young boy. Here he was, lying dead in a bin, 7 floors beneath his mother.
You just can't comprehend, but I certainly just, you know, we were all round her, all hugging her, just tragic.
But you have to be professional. You realise now you have a crime scene to cover. And it was a sharp intake of breath and try and get back to your duties the best you can.
Sometimes we underestimate the stress that is on a police officer. I could never cope. I found it very difficult to understand why a human being takes the life of another human being. And for the officers that were involved in this, dealing with the family and then seeing Mark's body, I don't know how they cope to this day. I was a detective inspector in that area, and it's a close-knit community. People look after each other. But what you're going to have is someone like Leggett who keeps himself below the radar. And he's normally, apart from his conviction, he's not going to go out there and announce that.
CID detectives are contacting known associates of Stuart Leggett to try to find him. But then, a surprising outcome for police.
I stood by the father's house in question just to make sure in case he was to walk back up the stairs.
This was all within 10 minutes of finding Mark. 10, 15 minutes. And I was standing there and it was like I was talking to people at the front of the line, and this man appeared just behind them. The only photograph I had of this fella, Mark Leggett, was a driving licence photograph, so it was tiny, a tiny, tiny photograph and a shaky video image. I thought, God almighty, that's Leggett, that's him.
I would imagine Stuart Leggett would have thought he was just returning to a normal flat and everything would be okay.
I was over the tape and got a hold of him. I said, "You're not going anywhere. You're coming with us. You're going to the police office." He said, "Oh, what have I done?" I said, "Just be quiet."
I'm convinced he didn't expect a wall of police when he turned the corner.
There's a big crowd there. They know what they've started to realise that there's been a child murdered and I've got somebody in custody. The crowd kind of turned nasty, but he gets bundled away right away, CID car, and taken away to the office.
It was so fast moving. It goes from a missing person inquiry to a horrible homicide and a person apprehended. So it was very, very quick. It was very, very quick.
I just remember hearing my mum saying, someone's getting arrested. Just questioning everything, why they're arresting him. I can hear my aunties and my uncles and everybody all sort of feet clamping out to the window or at the veranda to see and sort of discuss themselves.
Now in custody, police question Leggett about the death of Mark Cummings.
When Stuart Leggett was actually talking about it, it was like he was talking about going down for a bottle of milk and a loaf of bread. You know, it was incredible.
Leggett admitted what he did. He didn't lead the police in a wild goose chase. He did say, you need to prove it, whatever. He admitted it.
He'd actually murdered Mark. After disposing Mark down that bin chute, basically treating that boy like rubbish. Leggett had the foresight to take the clothing, which would have all sorts of forensics on it, and he drove to the east coast of Scotland and disposed of the clothes over a cliff top. He never disposed of it that well because we managed to get the clothes back and it had all the forensic evidence that was required.
As far as Leggett was concerned, he was progressing towards the ultimate. And he had other lewd and libidinous practices, kind of indecent behaviour. There was a grooming element there. So he'd committed all these things and he's progressing to the ultimate. And sadly, Mark was that ultimate where he killed him.
Police can't reveal detailed information during the initial part of the investigation. It's frustrating for the family.
I remember being in limbo. Mark's no longer here, but what's happened? Who's done this? I don't think the name was given initially, and we weren't aware that it was happened, you know, in the flat or anything either. We just knew that someone had been arrested.
The first thing I remember hearing was it was put down the chute. And that was hard to understand why somebody would want to do that to my brother. Like, what did he do? Why treat him like that? Then you hear that he was strangled.
Nobody actually knew about him. There wasn't anybody that I can recall that says that they ever seen him or met him. The whole community was in shock. Not one person could actually come up to me and say anything about Leggett.
I don't know how Mark's family coped with losing Mark in the horrible situation. She had to deal with his missing, he's found, dead, not so far from where they lived, killed by a sex offender.
What they went through, no family should go through. You shouldn't have to be told that your 8-year-old son's been found in a bin shed, dead. That's horrible. That's just not right.
The day of Mark's funeral, what we done was opened the whole place up because there had been rumours that it was somebody else that had committed the murders, like one of the refugees or somebody else from another culture and that. It was like my way of showing peace and all that is like inviting everybody. It doesn't matter that we're all the one community, all grieving at the same loss.
I remember getting to see Mark before we buried him. He used to obviously like his cars and stuff, and we were allowed to put some stuff with him that he could take with him. And we'd give him his wee penny and his figurines, and he always liked my car the best, and so I gave him that. He could take it with him.
The whole community was there. There was one of Mark's favourite songs, Special D, playing for his service. And I just remember, like, the chapel being packed out.
I couldn't focus, I couldn't speak to anybody, I couldn't see anybody. I didn't want to be there, I wanted to be somewhere else. It was just... But knowing that I had to be strong for my other two boys and let them see the happiness that everybody else was giving them, and there was what got me through the funeral and that day.
After the actual funeral service, when we were going along Royston Roads, shops were shut and everyone was out, you know, paying their respects, just kind of lining up along the street. A very, very sad day. It being a beautiful service.
For going to the trial, I was more than happy to go in and give evidence against Leggett. I knew what I had to say. It was as clear as a bell, and I didn't need to get my thoughts in place. My thoughts were crystal clear for that night.
I remember the courtroom, it was heavily guarded with police officers. There was lots of support unit staff there. There was probably a fear of a presence from the local community being there. I remember journalists being at every corner covering the story. It was very tense indeed.
There must have been a crowd of easily 100, 120 people, all from Royston. And not a lot of them were savoury types. And I believe Mark's father was amongst us. There must be 25, 26 police officers in the court. And they formed a kind of cordon, a loose cordon around this crowd.
Mark's mother is in court, but she already knows details, some from witnesses, of how her son was lured up to where Leggett was staying in the tower block.
Stacey, somebody that I knew, she'd been up at the house and that, and she'd seen Mark, and she'd seen him talking to somebody at the car.
Young Mark, young boy, out there with his friends, meets someone, speaks to them, someone that he trusts, an adult. Children of that age are vulnerable, and that's what happened here.
I think it was just the fascination of the car, and then obviously helping somebody.
This is a young boy that trusted them, and they would speak to him, and there would be all sorts of dialogue.
Leggett knowing how to play the game, with how his warped, horrible, evil mind works. Because Mark was helping them, it was like, well, because you've helped me, then I'll help you and give you some games and that, but you need to come up and get them and that. Leggett opened the fire exit for Mark to come round. That's like what was caught on the camera. Mark wouldn't have been even thought, because it's in the same block of flats. I don't think he would have even thought it was danger. Go up to the door, get them, walk away.
The murder happened at that flat. Leggett was a stocky, well-proportioned, big guy. Mark Cummins was a skinny little boy. He'd have probably tried his best to fight this guy off, but there's no way he'd have won. There was clothing disposed of, Leggett taking the clothing, and the house tidied up again. Out into the landing, there was a bin chute, and the body of Mark Cummins was put down the bin chute. Just horrendous, absolutely horrendous.
It had been established he was on the sex offenders register, so he had been involved in sexual offences before with young children, and here he was in a community and where there's young children.
After the prosecution went through the summary, Donald Finlay, QC, got up and he said, "What can I say? I can't say anything in defence." There's nothing you could say that could put any kind of defence on what he'd done. And somebody as fearsome as Donald Findlay, if he says that, well, you know, that's it. Donald Findlay was one of these guys, if there was a kind of string to pull out in defending somebody, he would do it. There was nothing that he could say that would justify anything of Leggett's. Probably the only decent thing Leggett did was plead guilty and didn't make that family go through any more turmoil. The judge had said that there's no words of sorrow and sympathy can be passed to the family of Mark Cummins, and there's no words that can even come near the revulsion of and the disgust of this court to you, Leggett.
I do recall him saying that he will serve 20 years minimum within the prison. Such was the gravity of the crime. I don't think there was any outbreak of celebration, if you like. You know, there was no people punching the air. There was no yes. There was no a kind of yeah. Everybody screaming yes.
I just remember thinking, this is very unfair. 20 years for, you know, is a short time, a very short time for taking Mark's life.
There was a stairway that led straight from the dock downstairs into the basement, and he was bundled down to the basement.
There was a general disbelief that the crime had taken place. It was obviously a huge story for the Royston area of Glasgow. It was an appalling crime, a sickening crime. And then you obviously have the question, you know, arrest or sex offender being in the local community.
With the killer now behind bars, there's a huge amount of anger as to why there was a dangerous sex offender unnoticed on the Royston estate.
He'd done it all totally underhanded with using a false last name. I know that the change in the name was to hide the fact of who he really was, so nobody else would question him. That even if they looked and said, oh, I know you, is your name Stuart Leggett? No, it's Stuart Main, I'm sorry, you got the wrong person and that, and mistaken identity or whatever. But it's known that the way that he went around deceiving people.
Why wasn't it picked up that he changed his name? Whoever was in charge of him should have known that he had changed his second name and he was going under another identity and he was finding jobs under another identity. The authorities on this occasion got it wrong. Stuart Leggett should never have been in that flat. There should have been more checks done. You know, we could only deal with the facts, and the facts were that Stuart Leggett was a resident at his father's house.
His father had nothing to do with that at all. He got taken away and he got interviewed extensively, believe me, by the CID, and he wasn't complicit.
Horrified that Leggett had managed to slip undetected into their community, Margaret discovers there are serious flaws in the system that monitors sex offenders.
Knowing that changes had to be done, when they'd done the sex offenders register in, was it 1998, they put it together, it was sort of not an official record that every police force sort of knew. Different police forces dealt with their own sex offenders. We like it moving out of one area and into another area. That information's not kind of getting passed, which meant the sex offenders are monitoring themselves to an extent.
Margaret Ann, the two boys, you know, all the family. I think at the time, with all this frustration, anger, we thought, you know, what can we do about this? You know, something has to change. Somebody has to be held accountable. But we also need to protect other children. Mark's Law is kind of what Margaret Ann was pushing for. Legislations be changed that you can obtain access to people as such living in your area that have got, you know, kind of criminal history that poses a risk to you or children around about you.
We sort of started doing the campaign, and it was the newspaper that put out for people to sign the petition and things like that, and then send it in. And when we got so many signatures and that, and we went to Parliament. We went down, and it was like just letting everybody know like what we're going to be fighting for.
I remember feeling overwhelmed, the sheer amount of people that were there. We all got T-shirts with Mark's face on it and Y on it.
We went to Parliament, sat around in their kind of tables and chairs, and we had a seat back and, you know, listened to them discussing kind of yes and no's.
I wasn't doing this on my own. It's not just me that spoke in Parliament that day. It was for everybody that signed that petition, for everybody that sat there and had my back and cheered me on when I was doing anything. It was everybody that went to Parliament with me that day, because we all want justice.
Mark's mum has been campaigning for years for change, and so have other families, and rightly so. It's the voice of the victim that's been killed, and for the families, it's their right to ask for change. Political change, government influence and processes. And it's also a coping process for the likes of Mark's mum. It keeps his name there, it raises awareness. Because we should never forget what happened to Mark, and we should never forget what Leggett did.
Life should mean life. Took a life, he should get life. I wished that I heard that word, that parole's never going to exist for him. We all want justice for the victims that are surviving through all this. We want them to grow up knowing that our system's tight, and not a chance that anything as major can happen again. We're hopefully getting there with Mark's Law. We're still hoping to see it used more frequent when people hear about it more, and don't forget about it and pass it on. My son just didn't die for nothing.